Good to be joined by the Kentucky Auditor, Allison Ball. A couple of reports that are coming out because all around the country there's work to be done. And I realize, Auditor, that there's a couple of reports that you guys have just done. One of these on the largest school district in Kentucky, Jefferson County, the Louisville area. Tell us about it.
Happy to talk about it. So I don't think this is any surprise to anybody because waste has been one of the main things people have been talking about all over the country when it comes to any kind of use of taxpayer dollars. But we saw a tremendous amount of financial waste in the Jefferson County public school system. In fact, it's so dramatic that it's almost shocking. We saw years on end of spending more than they were taking in revenue, which if you're running a business, you know you can't do that. You have to pay your bills. So as far back as 2022, the Jefferson County, which is the Louisville school district, Jefferson County School District has been expending more than it was taking in. Board was approving budgets that said that over and over and over again. It not only is it a big deal as a financial steward, but it's actually against the law in Kentucky to do that. So it's a tremendous problem in Jefferson County. But to make matters worse, so they have a financial problem. It's a tremendous hole. They began with $188 million in the hole. But that's not the worst problem. The worst problem is school proficiency.
Before we get to school proficiency, I want to clarify, how many millions are they over budget per year? Like, how bad is this budgetary situation for the district?
Great question. So we're actually almost $200 million in the hole right now in Jefferson County, which is a significant amount of money. And when you look at it, it's amazing. If you look at what their expenses have been, you can understand how you got into this kind of a mess. First of all, they had a culture that was not conducive to being good stewards of financial matters. They had
as many big cities want to be.
That's exactly true. They had a leader who was always described as a visionary, an optimist, only wants to talk about happy things. And he created this culture internally where nobody wanted to present him with bad news.
Toxic positivity.
Nobody wanted to present him with the real numbers and the real truth. And actually, it's interesting, as we dug in there, we saw that he was heavily involved in the internal audits. So as Superintendent Polio was his name. He's no longer the superintendent. They have a new guy in charge. But he was so heavily involved in the internal audits that everybody would have to run everything by him before it would be presented to the board or presented to the public. So he was carefully crafting a narrative that always made Jefferson County Public School look much, much better than it really was. So you had this problem of spin, essentially, going on. And then you had this problem of just straight up bad management, approving budgets that were clearly expending more than what their revenue was. And then as you start to dig into it, you can see, okay, you're also making some really bad choices. They got $500 million during COVID. You would think that would have helped. The year that they first began being in the hole in 2022, they got $500 million of federal dollars to just sort of boost things up during COVID. And it actually acted like a steroid. Instead of making them more careful with their money and plugging in holes, they just spent the money rapidly without doing a lot of analysis to figure out, is this something we want to spend our money on? Is this good? For example, they spent an enormous amount of money on Chromebooks for every student in Jefferson County. And the interesting thing about that is they don't last forever. So we're actually now beginning to get to the end of their life of these Chromebooks, and they don't have the money to buy new ones, which may in fact actually be a good thing, because as we looked at the use of them in the classroom, we think that they're contributing to the proficiency levels being so bad in Jefferson County Public Schools.
I mean, I'll say this just from a former science teacher and a former science administrator perspective, because I used to be the science director up at Indianapolis Public Schools for a time. The Chromebook usage is an absolute waste of money. They're worse than regular computers in every single way. And again, they are the most cheaply built, very thin plastic. And I mean, of course, students treat them as students do. It's a horrible investment. And that's before they open and turn on the Chromebooks. And then, it's autopilot after that. So how bad is the proficiency? Because I'm seeing all these videos on social media of kids not being able to read like 2-syllable words. They see the word chameleon and they just melt down because they're like, what on earth is a chameleon? I mean, what are we seeing out of Louisville? I'm kind of afraid to ask.
Unfortunately, the descriptors you just given would be accurate in Jefferson County. So one thing that we did is we looked to see, okay, we know a lot of schools took hits during COVID. We know that people they've all gone down. Have they been crawling their way back up again, or are they still low? So we compared with other school districts of the same size. We looked at Baltimore, we looked at San Diego in California. We looked at comparable groups so we could see, okay, are we doing unusually bad in Jefferson County Public Schools. And we found that we took a bigger hit and a more sustained hit in our proficiency levels. So everybody is abysmally low. But I want to point out one demographic in particular. We looked at African American students in Jefferson County. They're actually the largest demographic of students at Jefferson County Public Schools. They make up 36% of the enrolled students. So they are the plurality, the largest demographic. When we looked at their proficiency rates, so for example, we looked at third grade reading. So this is sort of like your base level. You've got to be able to start showing some proficiency level, some competency at this level. Third grade reading, African American students, we found that they were 14 points below the average Jefferson County Public School student. So they're lower than our peers we looked at. Black students are 14 points lower than the Jefferson County average and 27 points below the average Kentucky student. So Jefferson County is doing a tremendous disservice to this particular demographic, as well as other demographics. We looked at children with disabilities, we looked at multilingual students, because theirs were also abysmally low. And all of this revealed that the financials are a problem. Obviously, waste is a problem. We found a heavy expenditures of administration, not as much going into teachers, not as much going into the classroom, very top heavy in the central office. So we found a lot of problems in how they were spending their money. But
I remember how my colleagues at Indianapolis were paid tons of money for very little to no work. Yes, it's quite the epidemic.
Yes, it is. And actually, we also looked at, okay, how are we doing compared to the rest of the country in our teacher salaries? Our teacher salaries are below average. We're 42nd in the nation. We're 48th in the nation for first-year teachers, but we're higher than average when it comes to principals and assistant principals. So you can really see where our money is going. And unfortunately, the primary job of everybody in that school district is to make sure kids are educated, and they're failing in that.
So just from an auditor level here, and I don't want to ask you to, step outside of your role in the Commonwealth government, but just a clarification here, I hear what the kind of common argument that gets thrown back up is, well, actually, local government says that you can't do anything, you can't touch it. And I want to know that in Kentucky, obviously that's different than the other states and commonwealths. How is that brought forward? Like, what is there a state role, if there is any, in actually tackling some of this? If you can have a superintendent who, appropriately named, can just be a disease to the rest of the staff and block things from coming out or try to spin things or just keep spending money indefinitely. How do you solve that? Do you need a school board election? Is that the only way to fix it, or what's the alternative?
So it's a great question. So there is a new school superintendent. So that is a plus. There's somebody new who's come in. And our audit, our examination is 500 pages. And it's not just to identify the problem, it's also lay a blueprint for how to fix. So we've presented that to him. And on the plus side, he's been really positive and responsive so far about that information. Now, time will tell if he'll actually do something about it. But we've given him a blueprint to fix it. But I do think this is probably going to be a multiple aspect approach to fix this. And part of it does depend on the board. And we found all kinds of problems with the board, all kinds of problems with their decision making. And thankfully, the General Assembly has also noticed this, and they've made reforms to the board structure. They've changed the number, and they've changed the requirements for who can be on the board. So this should lend to a greater level of expertise. That's part of the problem, is that you've had people who don't really understand school finances just elected by the people. We really haven't had qualifications other than residential qualifications to sit on the school board. They're elected, but it does help if you have some experience, some background that prepares you to do this work. So there's some changes that have been made in that area. And I think the General Assembly, our state legislature in Kentucky, is looking very closely to see, are there other changes that need to be made? Because that can happen too. Does the district need to be broken up? Does it need to be smaller? Is it too big? These are all questions that I think we're gonna probably revisit in the next few years as we see what's the new superintendent going to do, and does this new board structure change this?
All right. Well, I think that answers, again, a lot of those particular questions. But I want to make it, clear that that's why this is so important to be a marathon approach. As soon as there's a report out, it's not just to read it, be aggravated, and then move on. It is incumbent on those that are in Kentucky to keep an eye on these things, not just because you're paying for it, because, again, the kids are going to grow up to become the future of Kentucky and the rest of us. So Kentucky Auditor Allison Ball, thanks for giving us a couple of minutes, and really appreciate your shining a light on this.
Thank you very much.